for the haunted man and the ghost bargain. Yielding to a certain sullen doggedness, which it seems to be part of his condition to struggle with, he argued for remaining. Was it only yesterday, he said, when I observed the memory of this old man to be a tissue of sorrow and trouble, and shall I be afraid tonight to shake it? Are such remembrances as I can drive away so precious to this dying man that I need fear for him? No, I'll stay here. But he stayed in fear and trembling nonetheless for these words, and shrouded in his black coat, with his face turned from them, stood away from the bedside listening to what they said, as if he felt himself a demon in the place. Father, murmured the sick man, rallying a little from his stupor. My boy George, said old Philip. You spoke just now of me being mother's favorite long ago. It's a dreadful thing, too, to think how now of long ago. No, returned the old man. Think of it. Don't say it's dreadful. It's not dreadful to me. My son, it cuts you to the heart, Father, for the old man tears were falling on him. Yes, said Philip, so it does, but it does me good. It's a heavy sorrow to think of that time, but it does me good, George. Oh, think of it too, and your heart will be softened, and more. Where's my son William? William, my boy, your mother loved him dearly, to the last, and with her last breath. Tell him I forgave him, blessed him, and pray for him. Those were her words to me. I have never forgotten them, and I'm 87. Father, said the man, now upon the bed, I am dying, I know. I am so far gone that I can hardly speak, even of what my mind most runs on. Is there any hope for me beyond this bed? For although there is hope, returned the old man, for all who are softened, there is hope for all such. Oh, he exclaimed, clasping his hands and looking up. I was thankful only yesterday that I could remember this unhappy son when he was an innocent child. But what a comfort it is now to think of that. Even God himself has that remembrance of him. Redlaw spread his hand upon his face and shrunk like an unaliver. Ah, feebly moaned the man upon the bed. The waste since then, the waste of life since then. But he was a child once, said the old man. He played with the children before he lay down on his bed at night and fell into his guiltless rest. He said his prayers at his poor mother's knee. I have seen him do it many times, and seen her lay her head upon her breast and kiss him. Sorrowful as it was to her and to me to think of this when he went wrong, and when her hopes and plans for him were all broken. This gave him still a hold upon us that nothing else could have given. Oh, Father, so much better than the fathers upon earth. Oh, Father, so much more afflicted by the errors of the children. Take this wanderer back, not as he is, but as he was then. Let him cry to thee, as he has so often seemed to cry to us. As the old man lifted up his trembling hands, the son, for whom he made the supplication, laid his sinking head against him for support and comfort, as if he indeed were the child of whom he spoke. When did men ever tremble as Redlaw trembled in the silence that ensued? He knew it must come upon them, knew that it was coming fast. My time is very short. My breath is shorter, said the sick man, supporting himself on one arm and with the other groping in the air. And I remember there was something on my mind concerning the man who was just here now. Father and William, wait. Is there really anything in black out there? Yes, yes, it's real, said his aged father. Is it a man? What I say myself, George, interposed his brother, bending kindly over him. It's Mr. Redlaw. I thought I had dreamt of him. Ask him to come here. The chemist, whiter than the dying man, appeared before him. Obedient to the motion of his hand, he sat upon the bed. It has to be so up tonight, sir, said the sick man, laying his hand upon his heart, and with a look in which the mute, imploring agony of his condition was concentrated by the sight of my poor old father, and the thought of all the trouble I have been the cause of, and all the wrong and sorrow lying at my door. That was it, the extremity in which he had come, or was it the dawning of another change that made him stop? That what I can do right, with my mind running on so much, so fast, I'll try to do. There was another man here. Did you see him? Redlaw could not reply by any word, for when he saw the final sign, and he knew so well now, of the wandering hand upon the forehead, his voice died at his lips, but he made some indication of assent. He is penniless, hungry, and destitute. He is completely beaten down, and has no resources at all. Look after him. Lose no time. I know he has it in his mind to unalive himself. It was working. It was on his face. His face was changing, hardening, deepening in all its shades, and losing all his sorrow. Don't you remember? Don't you know him? He pursued. He shut his face out for a moment with a hand that again wandered over his forehead and then lowered on Redlaw, reckless and ruffianly and callous. Why do you, he said, scowling around, what have you been doing to me here? I have lived bold, and I mean to die bold. To the devil with you. And so laying down upon his bed, he put his arms up and over his head and ears, as resolute form that time, to keep out all access, and to die in his indifference. If Redlaw had been struck by lightning, it could not have struck him from the bedside with more than a tremendous shock. But the old man, who had left the bed while his son was speaking to him, now returned, avoiding it quickly, likewise, and with abhorrence. Where's my boy William? Said the old man. Where's my boy William? Said the old man hurriedly. William, come away from here. We'll go home. Home, father, returned William. Are you going to leave your own son? Where's my own son? Replied the old man. Where? Why, there. That's no son of mine. said Philip, trembling with resentment. "No such wretch as that has any claim on me. My children are pleasant to look at, and they wait upon me, and get my meat and drink ready, and are useful to me. I've a right to it. I'm 87. "You are old enough to be no older," muttered William, looking at him grudgingly with his hands in his pockets. "I don't know what good you are myself. We could have a deal more pleasure without you." "My son, Mr. Redlaw," said the old man. "My son, too. The boy never talked to me of my son. Why, what has he ever done to give me any pleasure, I should like to know?" "I don't know what you have ever done to give me any pleasure," said William sulkily. "Let me think," said the old man. "For how many Christmas times running have I sat in my own warm place, and never had to come out in the cold night air, and have made good cheer, without being disturbed by such uncomfortable wretched sight as a man here in 20, William?" "Nigher 40, it seems," he muttered. "Why, when I look at my father, and come to think of it," addressing Redlaw with impatience and irritation that were quite new, "I am whipped if I can see anything in him but a calendar of ever so many years of eating and drinking and making himself comfortable over and over again." "I am 87, said the man, rumbling on childishly and weakly, "and I don't even know as I was ever much to put about with anything. I am not going to be now, because of what he calls my son. He's not my son. I've had the power of pleasant times. I recollected once. No, I don't. No, it's broken off. I wonder who he was. I suppose I liked him, and I wonder what became of him. I suppose he passed away, but I don't know. I don't care either. I don't care a bit. But his drowsy chuckling and the shaking of his head, he put his hand into his waistcoat pocket. If one of them found a bit of holiday left there probably last night, which he now took out and looked at it. "Berries! Ah," said the old man. "Ah, it's a pity when they're not good to eat. I recollect when I was a little chap about as high as that, and I went out walking with, let me see, who was I out walking with? No, I don't remember how that was. I don't remember as I ever walked with anyone particular. I cared for anyone, or anyone for me. Berries, they're good cheer when they're berries. Well, I ought to have my share of it, and to be waited on and kept warm and comfortable, for I'm 87, and a poor old man. I'm 87. 87. The driveling, pitiable manner in which was repeated this, he nibbled at the leaves and spat the morsel out. The cold, uninterested eyes with which the youngest son, so changed, regarded him, the determined apathy with which his eldest son lay hardened in his sin, impressed themselves no more on Redlaw's observation, for he broke his way from the spot to which his feet seemed to have been fixed, and ran out of the house. His guide came crawling forth from his place of refuge, and was ready for him before he reached the arches. "Back to the woman's?" he inquired. "Back quickly," answered Redlaw. "Stop nowhere on the way." For a short distance the boy went on before, but their return was more like a flight than a walk, and it was as much as his bare feet could do to keep the pace with the chemist's rapid strides. shrinking from all who passed, shrouded in his cloak, keeping it drawn closely about him as though there were mortal cogitation in any fluttering touch of his garment. He made no pause until he reached the door by which they had come out. He unlocked it with his key, went in, accompanied by the boy, and hastened through the dark passage to his own chamber. The boy watched him as he made the door fast and withdrew behind the table when he looked around. "Come," he said, "don't touch me. You've not brought me here to take my money away." Redlaw threw some more upon the ground. He flung his body on it immediately, as if to hide it from him, lest the sight of it should tempt him to reclaim it. It was not until he saw him seated by his lamp, with his face hidden in his hands, began furiously to pick it up. When he had done so, he crept near the fire, and sitting down in the great chair before it, took from his breast some broken scraps of food, and fell to munching and to staring at the blaze, and now and then to glance at his shillings, which he kept clenching up in a bunch in one hand. "And this," said Redlaw, gazing on him with increased repugnance and fear, "is only one companion I have left on earth." How long it was before he aroused from his contemplation of the creature whom he dreaded so, whether half an hour or half the night, he knew not, but the stillness of the room was broken by the boy whom he had seen listening, staring up and running towards the door. The woman, Here, the woman's coming," he exclaimed. The chemist stopped him on his way at the moment when he knocked. "Let me go to her, will you?" said the boy. "Not now," returned the chemist. "Stay here. Nobody must pass in or out of this room now." "Who's that?" "It is I, sir," cried Milly. "Pray, sir, let me in." "No, not for the world," he said. Mr. Redlaw, pray, sir, let me in." "What's the matter?" he said, holding the boy. "The miserable man you saw is worse, and nothing I can say will wake him from his terrible infatuation." William's father had turned childish in a moment. "William himself is changed. The shock has been so sudden for him. I cannot understand him. He is not like himself. Oh, Mr. Redlaw, pray advise me, help me." No, he answered. "Mr. Redlaw, dear sir, George has been muttering in a daze, in his doze, about the man you saw there, who, he fears, will unalive him. Better he should do it than come near me. He says it's his wandering, that you know him, and that he was your friend once long ago, that he is ruined father of your student here. In my mind, misgives me of a young gentleman who's been ill. What is to be done? How is he to be followed? How is he to be saved? Mr. Redlaw, pray advise me, help me." All this time he held the boy, who was half mad, to pass him and let her in. Phantoms, punishers of the impious thoughts, cried Redlaw, gazing round in anguish. "Look upon me from the darkness of my mind. Let the glimmer of contrition that I know is there shine up and show my misery in the material world, as I have long thought nothing could be spared. Not step nor atom in the wondrous structure could be lost, without a blank being made in the great universe. I know now that it is the same with good and evil, happiness and sorrow, in the memories of men. Pity me, relieve me." There was no response but her. Help me, let me in." The boy struggled to get to her. "Shadow of myself, spirit of my darker hour," cried Redlaw in distraction, "come back and haunt me day and night, but take this gift away. Or, if I must still rest with me, deprive me of the dreadful power of giving it to others, undo what I have done, leave me, but restore the day to those whom I have cursed, as I spare this woman from the first, and as if I will go forth again, but will die here, with no hand to tend me. Save this creature who is proof against me. Hear me." The only reply was the boy struggling to get to her, while he held him back, and the cry increased in its urgency. "Help! Let me in! He was your friend once. How shall he be followed? How shall he be saved? They are all changed. There is no one to help me. Pray, pray, let me in." Chapter 3. The Gift. Reversed. Night was still heavy in the sky. On open plains, from the hilltops and from the decks of the solitary ship at sea, a distant low line that promised by and by to change the light was visible in the dim horizon, but its promise was remote and doubtful, and the moon was striving with its nightly clouds busily. The shadows upon Rexclaw's mind succeeded, thickened fast to one another, and obscured its light, as the night clouds hovering between the moon and the earth, and kept the latter veiled in darkness, faithful and uncertain as the shadows which the night clouds cast were there, fitful and uncertain of the shadows which the night clouds cast from him, and imperfect revelations to him, and like the night clouds still, if the clear light broke forth for a moment, it was only that they might sweep over it and make the darkness deeper than before. Without, there was a profound and solemn hush upon the ancient pile and buildings and its buttresses, and the angles which made the dark shapes of mystery upon the ground, which now seemed to retire into the smooth white snow, and then come out of it, as the moon's path was more or less beset. Within the chemist's room, within the chemist's room was indistinct and murky by the light of the expiring lamp, a ghostly silence. Within the chemist's room was indistinct and murky by the light of the expiring lamp. A ghostly silence had succeeded to the knocking and the voice outside. Nothing was audible but, now and then, a low sound among the whitening ashes of the fire, as if yielding up its last breath. Before it, on the ground, the boy lay fast asleep. In his chair the chemist sat, as he had sat there since the calling at his door had ceased, like a man turning to stone. At some time, the Christmas music he had heard before began to play. He listened to it at first, as he had listened to it in the churchyard, but presently its playing still, and being borne towards him on the night air, a low, sweet, melancholy strain. He arose and stood, stretching his hands about him, as if there were some friend approaching within his reach, on whom his desolate touch might rest, yet do no harm. As he did this, his face became less fixed and wandering. A gentle trembling came upon him, and at last his eyes filled with tears, and he put his hands before them and bowed down his head. His memories of sorrow, wrong, and trouble had not come back to him. He knew that it was not restored. He had no passing belief or hope that it was, but some dumb stir within him made him capable again of being moved by what was hidden afar in the house, if it were only that it told him sorrowfully the value of what he had lost. He thanked heaven for it with a fervent gratitude. As the last chord died upon his ear, he raised his head and listened to it lingering vibration beyond the boy. So in his sleeping figure lay at his feet, the phantom stood, immovable and silent, with his eyes upon him. Ghastly it was, as if it had ever been, not so cruel and relentless in its aspect, or he thought or hoped so, as he looked upon it trembling. He was not alone, but in a shadowy hand it held another's hand. And whose was that? Was it the form beside him stood indeed that of Millie's, or but her shadow of a picture? The quiet head was bent a little as her manner was, and her eyes were looking down as if in pity on the sleeping child. A radiant light fell on her face, but did not seem to touch the phantom, for though close beside her, it was dark and colorless as ever. Spectre, said the chemist, now troubled as he looked. I have not been stubborn or presumptuous in respect of her. Oh, do not bring her here. Spare me that. This is but a shadow, said the phantom. When the morning shines, seek out the reality, whose image I present before you. It is my doom to do so, cried the chemist. It is, replied the phantom, to destroy her peace, her goodness, to make her what I am myself and what I have made others. I have said, seek her out, returned the phantom. I have said no more. Oh, tell me, exclaimed Redlaw, catching the hope for which he fancied might lie hidden in the words. Can I undo what I have done? No, returned the phantom. I do not ask for restoration for myself, said Redlaw. What I abandon of my own will, and have justly lost. But for those whom I have transferred the fatal gift, who never sought it, who unknowingly received a curse of which they had no warning, of which they had no power to shun, can I do nothing? Nothing. If I cannot, can anyone? The phantom, standing like a statue, kept his gaze upon him for a while, then turned his head suddenly and looked upon the shadow at his side. Ah, she can, cried Redlaw, looking upon this shape. The phantom released the hand it had retained till now, and softly raised his own with a gesture of dismissal. Upon that, her shadow, still preserving in the same attitude, began to move or melt away. Stay, cried Redlaw, with an earnestness to which she could not give enough expression. For a moment, as an act of mercy, I know that some change fell upon you when those sounds were in the air just now. Tell me, have I lost the power of harming her? May I go near her without dread? Oh, let her give me a sign of hope. The phantom looked upon the shade as he did, not at him, and gave no answer. At least say this: has she henceforth the consciousness of any power to set right what I have done? She has not, said the phantom. Has she the power bestowed on her without the consciousness? The phantom answered, seek her out. And her shadow slowly vanished. They were face to face again, and looking at each other intently and awfully as the time of the bestowal of the gift across the boy who still lay at the ground between them at the phantom's feet. Terrible instructor, said the chemist, sinking to his knees before it with an attitude of supplication, by whom I was renounced, but by whom I am revisited, in which and in whose milder aspect I would fain believe I have a gleam of hope. I will obey without inquiry, praying that the cry I have sent up to the anguish of my soul has been or will be heard in behalf of those whom I have injured beyond human reparation. But there's one thing. You speak to me of what is lying here. The phantom interposed and pointed with his finger at the boy. I do, returned the chemist. You know what I would ask. Why has this child alone been proof against my affliction, and why have I decided in its thoughts and terrible companionship with me? This, said the phantom, pointing at the boy, is the last, completest illustration of a human creature, utterly bereft of such remembrances as you have yielded up. No softening memories of sorrow, wrong, or trouble enters here, because this wretched mortal from his birth has been abandoned to a worse condition than the beasts, and has within his knowledge, to one contrast, no humanizing touch, to make a grain of such memories spring up at his hardened breast. All within the desolate creature is barren wilderness. All within the man, bereft of what you have resigned, is the same barren wilderness. Woe to such a man! Woe tenfold to the nation that shall count its monsters, such as this laying here by hundreds, by thousands. Redlaw shrunk, appalled from what he had heard. There is not, said the phantom, one of these, not one, but the sorrows of the harvest that managed sorrow. There is not one of these, not one, but the sorrow of the harvest that mankind must reap. From every seed of evil, this boy, a field of ruin, is growing, that shall be gathered in and garnered up and sown again in many places in the world, until regions are overspread with wickedness, enough to raise the water of another deluge. Open and unpunished, unalivers in the city street would be less guilty in this day of tolerance than one such spectacle as this. It seemed to look down upon the boy with his sleep. In his sleep, Redlaw too looked down upon him with new emotion. There is not a father, said the phantom, by whose side on his daily or nightly walk these creatures pass. There is not a mother among all these ranks of the loving mother in this land. There is no one risen from the state of childhood, but shall be responsible in his or her degree for this enormity. There is not a country throughout the earth on which it would not bring a curse. There is no religion upon earth that would not deny. There's no people upon earth that would not put to shame. The chemist clasped his hand and looked with trembling fear and pity from the sleeping boy to the phantom standing above him without his finger pointing down. Behold, I say, pursued the spectre, the perfect type of what it was your choice to be. Your influence is powerless here, because the child's bosom you can banish nothing. His thoughts have been in terrible companionship with yours, because you have gone down to his unnatural level. He is the growth of man's indifference. You are the growth of man's presumption. The beneficent designed in heaven, in each case overthrown, and from two poles of the immortal world you came together. The chemist stooped upon the ground beside the boy, and with some kind of compassion for him that he now felt for himself, covered him as he slept, and no longer shrunk from him with abhorrence and indifference.
Soon now the distant line on the horizon brightened, the darkened fields, the sun rose red and glorious, the chimney stacks and gables of the ancient buildings gleamed in the clear air, which turned the smoke and vapor of the city into cloud of gold. The very sundial in his shadowy corner, where the wind was used to spin with such unwindy consistency, shook off the finer particles of snow that had accumulated on his dull old face in the night, and looked out into the little white wreaths eddying around and around him. Doubtless some blind groping of the morning made its way down into the forgotten crypt, so cold and earthy, where the Norman arches were half buried in the ground, and stirred the dull sap in the lazy vegetation hanging on the wall, and quickened the slow principle of life within the little world of wonderful and delicate creation that existed there. With some faint knowledge that the sun was up, the Tetterbys were up and doing. Mr. Tetterby looked down at the shutters of the shop, and strip by strip revealed the treasures of the window to the eyes, so proof against their seduction of Jerusalem buildings. Adolphus had been out so long already that he was halfway on the morning pepper. 5 small Tetterbys, whose 10 round eyes were much inflamed by the soap and friction, were in the tortures of a cool wash in the back kitchen. Mrs. Tetterby, Johnny, who was pushed and hustled through his toilet with such great rapidity when Moloch chanced to be in an excited frame of mind, which was always the case, staggered up and down with his charge before the shop door, under great difficulties than usual, the weight of Moloch being much increased by a complication of defenses against the cold, composed of knitting, worsted work, and forming a complete suit of chain armor, with a headpiece and blue gaiters. It was a particularity of this baby to be always cutting teeth. Whether they never came or whether they came and went away again is not in evidence, but it had certainly cut enough on the showing of Mrs. Tetterby to make a handsome dental provision for the sign of the bowl and mouth. All sorts of objects were impressed for the rubbing of its gums, notwithstanding that it always carried, dangled at his waist, such was immediately under his chin, a bone ring, large enough to have represented the rosary of a young nun. Knife handles, umbrella tops, the heads of walking sticks selected from the stock, the fingers of the family in general, but especially of Johnny, nutmeg graters, crust, the handles of doors, cold knobs on the top of pokers, were among the commonest instruments indiscriminately applied for the baby's relief. The amount of electricity that must have been rubbed out of it in a week is not to be calculated. Still, Mrs. Tetterby always said it was coming through, and then the child would be herself. And still, it never did come through, and the child continued to be someone else. The timbers of the Tetterbys had sadly changed within a few hours. Mr. and Mrs. Tetterby themselves were not more altered than their offsprings. Usually they were all unselfishly good-natured, yielding little race, sharing sort commons when it happened, which was pretty often, contented and even generously in taking a great deal of enjoyment out of a very little meat. But they were fighting now, not only for soap and water, but even for the breakfast, which was yet in the perspective. The hand of every little Titterby was against the other little Titterbys, and even Johnny's hands. The patient, much enduring, and devoted Johnny rose against the baby. Yes, Mrs. Titterby was going to the door by mere accident, saw him viciously pick out a weak place in the suit of armor where to slap would tell, and slap the blessed child. Mrs. Tetterby had him in the parlor by the collar in the same flash of time, and repaid him the assault with assured thereto. You brute, you murdering little boy, said Miss Tetterby. Had you the heart to do it? Why don't her teeth come through then? Retorted Johnny in a loud, rebellious voice. Instead of bothering me, how would you like it yourself? Like it, sir, said Mrs. Tetterby, relieving him of his dishonored load. Yes, like it. How would you? Not at all. If it was you, you'd go for a soldier. I will too. There ain't no babies in the army. Mr. Tetterby, who had arrived upon the scene of action, rubbed his chin thoughtfully instead of correcting the rebel, and seemed rather struck by this view of military life. I wish I was in the army myself, if the child is right, said Mrs. Tetterby, looking at her husband, for I have no peace of my life here. I'm a slave, a Virginia slave, some in distinct association with their weak descendant on the tobacco trade, perhaps suggested this aggravated expression to Mrs. Tetterby. I never a holiday or any pleasure at all from year's end to year's end. Why, Lord bless and save the child, said Miss Tetterby, shaking the baby with an irritably hardly suited to so pious an aspiration. What's the matter with her now? Not being able to discover, and not rendering the subject much earlier by shaking it, Mrs. Tetterby put the baby away in a cradle, and folding her arms, sat and rocked it angrily with her foot. How do you stand there, Dolphus? Said Mrs. Tetterby to her husband. Why don't you do something? Because I don't care about doing anything, Mr. Tetterby replied. I'm sure I don't, said Mrs. Tetterby. I'll take my oath I don't, said Mr. Tetterby. A diversion arose here among Johnny and his 5 younger brothers, who, in preparing the family breakfast table, had fallen to skirmishing for the temporary possession of the loaf, and where, buffering one another with great heartiness, the small boy of Hall was preciously directed, hovering outside the knot of combatants and harassing their legs. Into the midst of this fray, Mr. and Mrs. Tetterby both precipitated themselves with great ardor, as if such grounds were the only grounds on which they could now agree, and having, with no visible remains of their late soft-heartedness laid about them, without any latency and done much execution, resumed their former relative positions. You had better read your paper than do nothing at all, said Mrs. Tetterby. What's there to read in the paper? Returned Mr. Tetterby with excessive discontent. What? Said Mrs. Tetterby. Police. That is nothing to me. What do I care what people do or about? Self-harm, suggested Miss Tetterby. No business of mine, replied her husband. Births, deaths, and marriages, those are nothing to you, said Mrs. Tetterby. If the births were all for good, and all date today, and all the deaths were all to begin to come off tomorrow, I don't see why I should be interested in me till I thought it was coming to my turn, grumbled Tetterby. As the marriage, I've done it myself. I know quite enough about them. To judge from the dissatisfied expression of her face, the manner Mrs. Tetterby appeared to entertain the same opinions as her husband, but she opposed him nevertheless for the gratification of quarreling with him. Oh, you're a consistent man, said Mrs. Tetterby, ain't you? You with the screen of your own making there, made of nothing else but bits of newspaper, which you sit and read to the children by half an hour together. Say used to, if you please, returned her husband. You won't find me doing so any more. I'm wiser now. Bah! Wiser indeed, said Mrs. Tetterby. Are you better? The question sounded some discordant note in Mr. Tetterby's breast. He ruminated dejectedly and passed his hand across and across his forehead. Better, murmured Mr. Tetterby. I don't know as any of us are better or happier either. Better is it? He turned to the screen and traced about it with his finger till he found a certain paragraph of which he was in quest. Is this to be one of the family favorites, I recollect, said Tetterby in a forlorn and stupid way, and used to draw tears from the children and make them good if there was any little bickering or discontent among them. Next, the story of the robin's redbreast in the woods, melancholy case of dissension. Yesterday, a small man with a baby in his arms and surrounded by half a dozen ragged little ones of various ages between 10 and 2, the whole of two who were evidently in a famished condition, appeared before the worthy magistrate and made the following recital. Ha! I don't understand it, I'm sure, said Tetterby. I don't see what it has got to do with us. How old and shabby he looks, said Mrs. Tetterby, watching him. I never saw such a change in a man. Oh, dear me, dear me, dear me. It was a sacrifice. What was a sacrifice? Her husband scourgely inquired. Mrs. Tetterby shook her head, and without replying, in words raised a complete sea storm about the baby by her violent agitation of the cradle. If you mean your marriage was a sacrifice, my good woman, said her husband. I do mean it, said his wife. Why, there I meant to say, persuaded Mr. Tetterby, as sulkily and surly as she, that there were two sides to that affair, and that I was the sacrifice, and that I was the sacrifice, that I wish the sacrifice hadn't been accepted. I wish it hadn't, Tetterby, with all my heart and soul. I do assure you, said his wife. You won't wish it more than I do, Tetterby. I don't know what I saw in her, muttered the newsman. I am sure, certainly, if I saw anything, it is not there now. I was thinking so last night, after supper by the fire. She's fat, she's aging, she won't bear comparison with most other women. He's common looking, he has no air with him, he's small, he's beginning to stoop, and he's getting bald, muttered Mrs. Tetterby. I must have been half out of my mind when I did it, muttered Mr. Tetterby. My senses must have forsook me. My senses must have forsaken me. That's the only way in which I can explain it myself, said Mrs. Tetterby with elaboration. In this mood they sat down to breakfast. The little Tetterbys were not habituated to regard the meal in light of a secondary occupation. In this mood they sat down to breakfast. The little Tetterbys were not habituated to regard that meal in the light of a sedentary occupation, but discussed it as a dance or trot, rather resembling a savage ceremony. An occasional shrill whoop and brandishing of bread and butter with which it was accompanied, as well as there with the intricate flingings off into the street and back again, and the hopping up and down on the doorstep, which were incidental to the performance. The present incident, the contention between these Tetterby children for the milk and water jug, common to all, which stood upon the table, presented so lamentable an instant of angry passion, risen very high indeed, that it was the outrage on this memory of Dr. Watts. It was not until Mr. Tetterby had driven the whole herd out into the front of the door that a moment's peace was secured, and even that was broken by the discovery that Johnny had serendipitously came back and was in that instant choking the little jug like a ventriloquist in his indecent and rapturous haste. These children will be the death of me at last, said Mrs. Tetterby after banishing the culprit, and the sooner the better, I think. Poor people, said Mr. Tetterby, ought not to have children at all. They gave us no pleasure. He was at that moment taking up the cup which Mrs. Tetterby had rudely pushed towards him, and Mrs. Tetterby was lifting her own cup to her lips, and they both stopped as they were transfixed. Here, mother, father, here, Mrs. Williams is coming down the street. And if ever since the world began, a young boy took a baby from the cradle with the care of an old nurse, and hushed and soothed it tenderly, and tottered away with it cheerfully, Johnny was that boy, and Moloch was the baby. As they went out together, Mr. Tetterby put down his cup, Mrs. Tetterby put down her cup, Mr. Tetterby rubbed his forehead, Mrs. Tetterby rubbed hers, Mr. Tetterby's face began to smooth and brighten, Mrs. Tetterby began to smooth and brighten. Why, Lord forgive me, said Mr. Tetterby to himself, what evil tempers I have given way to. What has been the matter here? How could I ever treat him so ill again after all I have said and felt last night, sobbed Mrs. Tetterby with her aprons to her eyes. I am such a brute, said Mr. Tetterby. Or is there any good in me at all? Sophia, my little woman, Dolphus, dear, returned his wife. I have been in a state of mind, said Mr. Tetterby, that I can't bear to think of it, Seppi. Oh, it's nothing to what I've been in, Dolph, cried his wife in a great burst of grief. My Sophia, said Mr. Tetterby, don't take on. I never shall forgive myself. I must have nearly broke your heart. I know. No, Dolph, no, it was me. Me, cried Mrs. Tetterby. My little woman, said her husband. Don't you make me reproach myself. Dreadful when you show such a noble spirit. Sophia, my dear, you don't know what I thought. I showed it bad enough, no doubt, but what I thought, my little woman. Oh, dear Dolph, don't. Sophie, said Mr. Tetterby, I must reveal it. I can't rest in my conscience unless I mention it. My little woman. Mrs. Williams, very nearly here, screamed Johnny at the door. My little woman, I wonder how. Mr. Tetterby, supporting himself by his chair, I wonder how I had ever admired you. I forgot the precious children you have brought about me, and thought you didn't look as slim as I could wish. I never gave a recollection. said Mr. Tetterby, with severe self-accusation, to the cares you have as my wife, and along of me and mine, when you might have had hardly any with another man who got on better with, and was luckier than me. Anybody might have found such a man easily, I am sure. And I quarrel with you for having aged a little in the rough years you've been lightened for me. Can you believe it, my little woman? I can hardly believe myself. Mrs. Tetterby, in a whirlwind of laughing and crying, caught his face with her hands and held it there. Oh, Dolph, she said, don't cry. I am so happy that you thought so. I'm so grateful that you thought so, for I thought that you were common-looking, Dolph, and so you are, my dear. And may you be the commonest of all sights in my eyes till you close them with your own good hands. I thought that you were small, and so you are, and I make much of you because you are, and much more of you because I love my husband. I thought that you began to stoop, and so you did, and you shall lean on me, and I'll do all I can to keep you up. I thought there was no air about you, but there is, and it's the air of home, and it's the purest and the best there is, and God bless home once more, and all belonging to it. Hooray! Hurry! Hurry, Miss Williams! Here's Miss Williams, cried Johnny. So she was, all the children with her, and as she came in, they kissed her and kissed one another and kissed the baby, kissed their father and kissed their mother, and ran back and forth and danced about her, tromping on with her in triumph. Mr. and Mrs. Tetterby were not a bit behind in the warmth of their reception. They were as much attracted to her as the children were. They ran towards her, kissed her hands, pressed round her, could not receive her ardently or enthusiastically. She came among them like a spirit of all goodness, affection, gentle consideration, love, and home. What are you all so glad to see me to this bright Christmas morning? Said Milly, clapping her hands in pleasant wonder. Oh dear, how delightful this is! More shouting from the children, more kissing, more tromping about her, more happiness, more love, more joy, more honor on all sides than she could bear. Oh dear, said Milly, what delicious tears you make me shed. How could I ever have deserved this? What have I done to be so loved? Who can help it? Cried Mr. Tetterby. Who can help it? Cried Mrs. Tetterby. Who can help it? Echoed the children in a joyful chorus. And they danced and tromped about her again, and clung to her, and laid her rosy face against their dress, and laid their rosy faces against her dress, and kissed and fondled it, and could not fondle it or her enough. I was never so moved, said Milly, drying her eyes, as I have been this morning. I must tell you, as soon as I can speak, Mr. Redclaw came to me at sunrise, and with such tenderness in his manner, more as if it had been his darling daughter than myself, implored me to go with him to where William's brother George is laying ill. We went together, and all the way along he was so kind and so subdued, and seemed to put such trust and hope in me, that I could not help cry with pleasure. Then when we got to the house, he met with a woman at the door. Somebody had bruised and hurt her, I'm afraid, who caught me by the hand and blessed me as I passed. She was right, said Mr. Tetterby. Mrs. Tetterby said she was right. All the children cried out that she was right. Ah, but there's more than that, said Milly. When we got up the stairs and into the room of the sick man, who had laid for hours in a state from which no effort could rouse him, rose up in his bed and burst into tears, stretching out his arms to me, and said that he had led a misspent life, but that he was truly repentant now in his sorrow for the past, which was all as plain to him as the great prospect, from which a dense black cloud had cleared away. And then he entreated me to ask his poor old father for his pardon and his blessing, and so to say a prayer beside his bed. And when I did so, Mr. Redlaw joined in so fervently, and then so thanked me, and thanked heaven, that my heart quite overflowed. And as I could have done nothing but sob and cry, if the sick man had not begged me to sit down by him, which made me quiet, of course, as I said, there he held my hand in his till he sunk in a doze, and even then, when I withdrew my hand to leave the room, he came to with. As I sat there, he held my hand in his. He sank in a doze, and even then, when I withdrew my hand to leave him to come here, which Mr. Redlaw was very earnest indeed in wishing me to do, his hand felt for mine, so that someone was obligated to take my place and make believe to give him my hand back. Oh dear, Milly said, sobbing. How thankful, yes, how happy I should feel and do feel for all of this. While she was speaking, Redlaw had come in and was, after pausing for a mention, while she was speaking, Redlaw came in, and after pausing for a moment to observe this group, of which she was the center, had silently ascended the stairs. Upon the stairs now, he appeared again, remained then while the young student passed him, came running down. Kind nurse, gentlest, best of creatures, he said, falling to his knees to her, catching her hand. Forgive my cruel ingratitude. Oh dear, cried Milly innocently. Here's another of them. Oh dear, here's somebody else who likes me. What shall I ever do? The guileless, simple way in which she had said it, and in which she put her hand before her eyes and wept for the very happiness, was as touching as it was delightful. I was not myself. I did not know what it was. It was some consequence of my disorder, perhaps. I was mad, but I am so no longer. Almost as I speak, I am restored. I heard the children crying out your name, and the shade passed from me. The very sound of it. Oh, don't weep, dear Milly. If you could read my heart, and only know what affection and great homage it is glowing, you would not let me see you weep. It is such a deep reproach. No, no, said Milly. It's not that. It's not that indeed. It's joy. It's wonder that you should think it's necessary to ask my forgiveness so little, and yet it is such a pleasure that you do. And will you come again? And will you finish the little curtain? No, said Milly, drying her eyes and shaking her head. You won't care for my needlework now. It is forgiven me to say that. She beckoned him to his side and whispered in his ears, There is news from your home, Mr. Edmund. News? How? Either you're not writing when you were very ill, or the change in your handwriting when you began to be better created some suspicion of the truth. However that is, but you're sure you're not the worse for any news if it's not bad news. Sure, then there's someone to come. My mother? Asked the student, glancing around involuntarily towards Redlaw, who had come down from the stairs. Hush! No, said Milly. It can be no one else. Indeed, are you sure? It is not. But before he could say more, she put her hand upon his mouth. Yes, it is, said Milly. The young lady. She is very like a miniature, Mr. Edmund, but she is prettier. Was too unhappy to rest without satisfying her doubts, and came up last night with a little servant maid. As you always dated your letters from the college, she came there, and before I saw Mr. Redlaw this morning, I saw her. She likes me too, said Milly. Oh dear, that's another. This morning, where is she now? Why, she is now, said Milly, advancing her lips to his ear, in my little parlour in the lodge and waiting to see you. He pressed her hand and darted off, but she detained him. Mr. Redlaw is much altered, and has told me this morning that his memory is impaired. Be very considerate of him, Mr. Edmund. He needs that from all of us. The young man assured her by a look that her caution was not ill bestowed, and as he passed the chemist on his way out, bent respectfully and with an obvious interest before him. Redlaw returned the salutation courteously and even humbly, and looked after him as he passed on. He dropped his head upon his hand too, as trying to reawaken something he had lost, but it was gone. The abiding change that had come upon him since the influence of that music and the phantom's reappearance was, that now he truly felt how much he lost, and could compassionate his own condition, and contrast it clearly with the natural state of those around him, and this, an interest in those who were around him was revealed. An interest in those who were around him revived, and a meek, submissive sense of his calamity was bred, resembling that which sometimes obtains in age, when its mental powers are weakened, without insensibility or silliness being added to the list of information, without being added to the list of infirmaries. He was conscious that, as he redeemed through Milly more and more of the evil he had done, and as he was more and more with her, this change ripened itself within him. Therefore, and because of the attachment she inspired with him, but without other hope, he felt that he was quite dependent on her, and that she was his staff in his affliction. So when she asked him whether they should go home now, to where the old man and her husband were, he replied yes, anxiously in the regard, but put his arm through hers and walked beside her, not as if he were the wise and learned man to whom the wonders of nature were an open book, and hers were an unrestricted mind, but as if their two positions were reversed, and he knew nothing, and she knew all. He saw the children throng about her and caress her. As he and she went away together thus out of the house, he heard the ringing of the laughter and their merry voices. He saw their bright faces clustered around him like flowers. He witnessed the renewed comments and affection of their parents. He breathed the simple air of their poor home, restored its tranquillity. He thought of the unwholesome light he had shed upon it, and might, but for her, have been diffusing them. And perhaps it is no wonder that he walked submissively beside her and drew her gentle bosom nearer his own. When they arrived at the lodge, the old man was sitting in his chair in the chimney corner, and his eyes fixed on the ground, and his son, leaning against the opposite side of the fireplace, looked at him. As she came in at the door, both stared and turned around towards her, a radiant change upon their faces. Oh, dear, 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 they're pleased to see me, like the rest, cried Milly, clapping her hands in ecstasy, and stopping short. Here are two more. Pleased to see her. Pleasure was no word for it. She ran to her husband's arms, thrown wide open to receive her, and he would have been glad to have her there with her, head lying on his shoulder through the short winter's day. But the old man couldn't spare her. He had arms for her too, and he locked her in them. Why, where's my quiet mouse been all of this time? She's been a long while away. I find that it's impossible for me to get on without Mouse. I'm where my son William. I fancy I've been dreaming. William. That's what I say myself, father, returned his son. I have been in an ugly sort of dream, I think. How are you, father? Are you perfectly well? Strong and brave, my boy, returned the old man. It was quite a sight to see Mr. William shaking hands with his father and patting him on the back and rubbing him gently down with his hand, as if he could not possibly do enough to show an interest in him. What a wonderful man you are, father. How are you, father? Are you really pretty hearty, though? Said William, shaking hands with him again, patting him again, and rubbing him gently again. I was never fresher or stouter in my life, my boy. What a wonderful man you are, father. But that's exactly where it is, said Mr. William, said enthusiastically. When I think of all that my father's gone through, and I think of the chances and the changes, the sorrows and the troubles that have happened to him in the course of his long life, and under which his head has grown gray, years upon years have gathered on it, I feel as if I couldn't do enough to honor the old gentleman and make his old age easy. How are you, father? Are you really pretty well, though? Mr. Williams might have never left off repeating this inquiry and shaking hands with him again and patting him again and rubbing him again, if the old man had not espied the chemist, whom until now he had not even seen. I ask your pardon, Mr. Redlaw, said Philip, but don't know you were here, sir, or should I have made less free? It reminds me, Mr. Redlaw, seeing you here on Christmas morning, of the time when you were a student yourself, and working so hard that It reminds me, Mr. Redlaw, seeing you here on Christmas morning, of the time when you were a student yourself, and working so hard that you was backwards and forwards in our library, even at Christmas time. Ah, ha, ha, ha. I'm old enough to remember that, and I remember right well I do, though I'm 87. It was after you left here that my poor wife died. You remember my poor wife, Mr. Redlaw? The chemist answered, yes. Yes, she was a dear creature. I recall you came here one Christmas morning with a young lady. I asked your pardon, Mr. Redlaw, but I think it was a sister you were very much attached to. The chemist looked at him and shook his head. I had a sister, he said vacantly. He knew no more. One Christmas morning, persuaded the old man, that you came here with her, and it began to snow, and my wife invited the young lady to walk in and sit by the fire that is always a burning on Christmas Day in what used to be, before our 10 poor gentlemen commuted, our great dining hall. I was there, and I recollect, as I was staring at the blaze for the young lady to warm her pretty feet pie, she read the scroll out loud, and is underneath that, Lord, keep my memory green, she said, and my poor wife fell a talking about it, and it's a strange thing to think of now, that they both said, both being so unlike to die, that it would put up very honestly if they were called away young, and reference to those who were dearest to them. My brother, says the young lady. My husband, says my poor wife. Lord, keep his memory of me green, and do not let me be forgotten. Tears more painful and more bitter than he had ever shed in all his life coursed down Redlaw's face. Philip, fully occupied in recalling his story, had not observed him until now, nor Milly anxiety that he should not proceed. Philip, said Redlaw, laying his hand upon his arm, I am a stricken man, on whom the hand of Providence has fallen heavily, although deservedly. You speak to me, my friend, of what I cannot follow. My memory is gone. Merciful power, cried the old man. I have no memory of sorrow, wrong, and trouble, said the chemist, and with that I have lost all man would remember. To see old Philip's pity for him, to see him wheel his own great chair for him, to rest in and look down upon him with a solemn sense of bereavement, was to know, in some degree, how precious to old age such recollections are. This boy came running in and ran to Milly. Here's the man, he said, in the other room. I didn't want him. What man does he mean? Asked Mr. William. Hush, said Milly. Obedient to a sign from her, he and his old father softly withdrew. As they went out unnoticed, Redlaw beckoned the boy to come to him. I like the woman best, he answered, holding to her skirts. You're right, said Redlaw, with a faint smile, but you needn't fear to come to me. I am gentler now than I was. Of all the world to you, poor pet. The boy still held back at first, but yielded little by little to her urging. He consented to the approach, and even to sit down at her feet, as Redlaw laid his hand on the shoulder of the child, looking on with compassion and a fellow feeling. He put out his hand to Milly. She stooped down on the side of him so that she could look into his face, and after silence said, Mr. Redlaw, may I speak to you? Yes, he answered. Your voice and music are the same to me. May I ask you something? What you will. Do you remember what I said when I knocked at your door last night about one who was your friend once and who stood on the verge of destruction? Yes, I remember, he said with some hesitation. Do you understand it? He smoothed the boy's hair, looking at her fixedly, and shook his head. This person, said Milly, in her clear, soft voice, which, with her mild eyes looking at him, made clearer and softer. I found soon that afterwards I went back to the house, and with heaven's help traced him. I was not too soon, and very little, and I should have been too late. He took his hand from the boy and laid on the back of the hand of hers, whose timid and yet earnest voice and eyes looked more intently at him. He is the father of Mr. Edmund, the young gentleman he saw just now. His real name is Longford. You recall the name? I recall the name. And the man? No, not the man. Did he ever wrong me? Yes. Ah, then it's hopeless. Hopeless. His hand. He shook his head and softly beat upon his head. He held as though mutely asking for her commiseration. I did not go to Mr. Edmund's last night, said Milly. You will listen to me just the same as if you did remember, to every syllable you say. Both because I didn't know then that this really was his father, and because it was fearful of the effects of such an intelligence upon him after his illness, if it should be. Since I have never known who this person is, I have not gone either, but that is for another reason. He has long been separated from his wife and son, has been a stranger to his home almost from his son's infancy. I learned from him and had abandoned and deserted what he should have held innermost dear. All in the time he has been falling from the state of gentleman more and more, until she rose up hastily, and going out for a moment returned accompanied by a wreck that Redlaw had beheld last night. Do you know me? Asked the chemist. I should be glad, retorted the other, and that is an unwonted word for me to use if I could answer no. The chemist looked at the man in self-abasement and degradation before him, and would have looked longer if an ineffectual struggle of enlightenment, but that Milly resumed her late position by his side and attracted his attention gaze to her own face. See how low he has sunk, how lost he is, she whispered, stretching out her arm towards him without looking at the chemist's face. If you could remember all that is connected with him, do you not think it would move your pity to reflect that one you never loved? Do you not let... God, this book is forever. If you could remember that all is connected with him, do you not think it would move your pity to reflect upon that one you ever loved? Do you not let us mind how long ago, or with the belief that he has forfeited, should come to this? I hoped it would, he answered. I believed it would. His eyes widened to the figure standing near the door, came back speedily to her, on whom his gaze intently, as if he strove to learn some lesson from every tone of her voice and every beam of her eye. "I have no learning, and you have much," said Milly. "I'm not used to think, and you always are thinking. I may tell you why it seems to me a good thing for us to remember wrong that has been done to us. Yes, that we may forgive it." "Pardon me, great heaven," said Redlaw, lifting his eyes, "for having thrown away thine own high attribute." "And if," said Milly, "if your memory should one day be restored, as we shall hope and pray it will be, would it not be a blessing to you to recall at once a wrong and its forgiveness?" He looked at the figure by the door, and fastened his attentive eyes on her again. A ray of clear light appeared to him to shine into his mind from her bright face. He cannot go to the abandoned home. He does not seek to go there. He knows that he could only carry shame and trouble to those he has cruelly neglected, and that the best reparations he can make them now is to avoid them. Very little money carefully bestowed would remove him to some distant place where he might live and do no wrong, and make such atonement as is left within his power for the wrong he has done. To the unfortunate lady, to his wife, and to his son, who would be the best and kindest born of their best friend, to give them one, two, as they need never know of, and to him, shattered in reputation, mind, and body, it might be salvation. He took her hand between his and kissed it, and said, "It shall be done. I trust you to do it for me, now and secretly, and to tell him that I will forgive him if I were so happy as to know what for." As she rose and turned her beaming face towards the fallen man, implied that her meditation had been successful. As she rose and turned her beaming face towards the fallen man, to imply that her mediation had been successful, he advanced a step, and without raising his eyes, addressed himself to Redlaw. "You are so generous," he said. "You ever were. That you will try to banish your rising sense of retribution. In the spectacle that is before you, I do not try to banish it from myself, Redlaw, if you can believe me." The chemist entreated Milly by a gesture to come nearer to him, and, as he listened, looked at her face as if to find its clue to what he had heard. "I am too decayed a wretch to make a profession. I recollect my own career too well to write any such before you, but from the day on which I made my first steps downward in dealing falsely by you, I have gone down with a certain steady, doomed progress that I have to say." Redlaw, keeping her close to his side, turned his face towards the speaker, and there was sorrow in it, something a mournful recognition too. "I might have been another man in my life, might have been another life, if I had avoided the first fall. I don't know that it would have been. I claim nothing for the possibility. Your sister is at rest, and better than she could have been with me. If I had continued, even what you thought of me, even what I had once supposed myself to be." Redlaw made a hasty motion with his hand, as if he would have put the subject to his side. "I speak," said the other, "like a man taken from the grave. I should have made my own grave last night, made it not, had it not been for this blessed hand." "Oh dear, he likes me too," sobbed Milly. "It's another. I could not have put myself in your way last night, even for bread. But today my recollection of what has been between us, I don't know how so vividly, that I have dared to come to your that I dared to come at her suggestion and take your bounty, and to thank you for it, and to beg you, Redlaw, in your dying hours, to be as merciful to me in your thoughts as you are in your deeds." He turned to the door and stopped a moment on his way forth. "I hope my son may interest you, for his mother's sake. I hope he may deserve to do so, unless my life should be preserved a long time, and I should know that I have not misused your aid. I shall never look upon him more." Going out, he raised his eyes to Redlaw. For the first time, Redlaw, whose steadfast gaze was fixed on him, dreamily held out his hand. He returned and touched it a little more with his own, and bending down his head, went slowly out. In a few moments that had elapsed, Milly silently took In the few moments that had elapsed, while Milly took him to the gate, the chemist dropped into his chair and covered his face with his hands. Seeing him thus, when he came back, accompanied by her husband and her father, they were both greatly concerned for him. She avoided disturbing him, or permitting him to be disturbed, and knelt down near the chair to put some warm clothes on the boy. "That is exactly where it is. That's what I always say, father," exclaimed her admiring husband. "There's motherly feelings in Miss William's breast, and must and will have went." "Aye, aye," said the old man. "You're right, my son, William, right." "It happens all for the best, my dear, no doubt," said William tenderly, "that we have no children of our own, and yet sometimes wish you had one to love and cherish our little dead child that you built such hopes upon, and that never breathed the breath of life. It has made you quiet like Milly. I am very happy in the recollection of it, William dear, she answered. I think of it every day. I was afraid you thought of a good deal. Don't say afraid. It comforts me. It speaks to me in so many ways. The innocent thing that never lived on earth. It's like an angel to me, William. You're like an angel to father and me, said Mr. William softly. I know that. When I think of all those hopes I built upon it, and of many times I sat and pictured myself, and the little smiling face upon my bosom that never lay there, and the sweet eyes turning up to mine that never opened in the light. Milly, I can feel a greater tenderness, I think, for all the disappointed hopes in which there is no harm. When I see a beautiful child in its mother's loving arms, I love it all the better, thinking that my child might have been like this and that, and made my heart as proud and happy. Redlaw raised his head and looked forward. All through life, it seems by me, she continued, to tell me something. For poor, neglected children, my little child pleads as if it were alive, that I had a voice I knew with which I speaks to me. When I hear of youth and suffering or shame, I think that my child might have come to that, perhaps, and that God took it from me in his mercy. Even in age and gray hair, such as father's, it is present, saying that it too might have lived to be old long and long after you and I were gone, to have needed the respect and the love of younger people. Her quiet voice was quieter than ever as she took her husband's arm and laid her head against it. Children love me so that sometimes I half fancy, it's a silly fancy, William, they have some way I don't know of feeling for my little child and me, and understanding why their love is so precious to me. If I had been quiet since, I had been more happy, William, in 100 ways, not least happy, dear, in this, that even when my little child was born and dead, but a few days I was with weak and sorrow, and could not help grieving a little. The thought arose that if I tried to lead a good life, I should meet in heaven the bright creature who would call me mother. Your sister is at rest, and better, but she could have not. Mm, there it is. God, my eyes are so watering. Redlaw fell upon his knees with a loud cry. "O thou," he said, "who through the teaching of pure love hast graciously restored me to the memory, which is the memory of Christ upon the cross, of all the good. O thou who with teachers of pure love hast graciously restored me to the memory, which is the memory of Christ upon the cross, and all the good who has perished in his cause, receive my thanks and bless her." Then he folded her to his heart, and Milly sobbed more than ever, cried as she laughed. "He has come back to us." Then the student entered. "He likes me very much indeed. Oh dear, dear, dear me." Then the student entered, leading by the hand a lovely girl who was afraid to come, and Redlaw then changed towards him, seeing in him and his youthful choice the softened shadow of the chastening passage in his own life, to which, as to a shade tree, the dove so long imprisoned in a solitary ark might fly for and rest. The company fell upon his neck, entreating them to be his children. Then, as Christmas is the time in which of all the times of years, the memory of every rememberable sorrow, wrong, and trouble in the world goes around, should be active within us, not less than our own experiences, for all good. He laid his head upon the boy and silently called him to witness who he laid his hand on children in the old time, rebuking in the majesty of his prophetic knowledge those who kept them from him, vowed to protect him, teach him, and release him, or reclaim him. Then he gave his right hand cheerily to Philip, and said that they would hold a Christmas dinner in what used to be, before the 10 poor gentlemen commuted, their great dining hall, and they would bid to it as many of the Swidger family, who, his son had told him, were so numerous that they might join hands and make a ring around England, as could be brought together on so short a notice. And it was that day dawn. There were so many Swidgers there, grown up and children, that an attempt to state them in round numbers might engender doubts in the distrustful of the veracity of this history. Therefore, the attempt shall not be made. But there they were by dozens and scores. There was good news and good hope there, ready for them of George, who had been visited again by his father and brother, and by Milly, and again left in a quiet sleep. There, present at the dinner too, were the Tetterbys, including young Adolphus, who arrived in from his prismatic comfort in the good time with the beef. Johnny and the baby were there, late of course, and came in all on side of one exhausted, the other in a supposed state of double tooth. But that was customary and not alarming. It was sad to see the children who had no name or lineage watching the other children as they played, not knowing how to talk to them or support them, and more strange to think of children than a rough dog. It was sad, though, in a different way, to see what instinctive knowledge the youngest children there had of him being different from all the rest, and how they made him timid approaches to him with soft words and touches, and with little presents, that he might not be unhappy. But he kept by Milly and began to love her. That was another, as she said, and as they all liked her dearly, they were glad when they saw him peeping at them from behind her chair. They were pleased that he was so close to it. All this the king sitting with the student and his bride that was to be, and Philip and the rest saw. Some people having said since that he only thought what has been herein set down, others that he read it in the fire one winter night about the twilight time, others that the ghost was but a representation of his gloomy thoughts, and Milly embodied for his better wisdom. I say nothing, except this, that they were assembled in the old hall by no other light than that of the great fire. Having dined early, the shadows once more stole out from their hiding places and danced about the room, showing the children marvelous shapes and faces on the walls, and gradually changed what was real and familiar there to what was wild and magical. But there was one thing in the hall to which the eyes of Redlaw and of Milly and her husband, and of the old man, and of the student and his bride, that was to be there, where others turned with the shadows did not obscure there or change, deepened in its gravity by the firelight, and gazing from the darkness of the paneled wall, like life. There, the sedated face in the portrait, with the beard and ruff, looked down at them from under the verdant wreath of holly, and they looked up at it, and clear and plain, below, as if the voice had uttered them, were the words, Lord, keep my memory green. The end.